Hey guys, what's going on? This is Warroyd here, and today we are looking at the Windwalker guide, right? As in how to counter Windwalkers. Not a guide for Windwalkers, but for warriors or really any other classes as well that want to understand a bit more about Windwalkers, how they operate, why they feel so oppressive at sometimes, and they, can just blow up your entire team. Why there's big variances in their health pools, right? Because they will you'll be destroying a Windwalker, then they'll be full health with, what feels like there's no pressure on them. So getting a better understanding of what this class does, right? So I do have an alt Windwalker. I play it pretty casually, not too seriously, and just for twos and random stuff like that. And generally, the Windwalker kit is based on, you know, getting a Tiger Palm and Expel Harm to get some Chi and potentially Fist of the White Tiger, and popping these mad Rising Sun kicks as well, right? So I'll port back to Elijah and Hold to get on a target dummy and give you kind of example of the rotation, right? Which isn't too important to know, but you kind of see why it's relevant very soon. The majority of Windwalkers that you'll verse in PvP, especially ones who are competing or like trying to push rating, not necessarily competing in the AWC or anything, run Kyrian with Pelagos, right? Which gives them extra mastery when they use their Kyrian ability. So, um, what you tend to do is monks use chi and energy, right? They use energy to build chi, and then they use chi on their big damage spenders, right? So you'll see sort of the damage rotation as a whole sort of revolves around using building up to Rising Sun Kick and fists, and then Whirling Dragon punching at the end. They have a Mortal Strike coming from their Rising Sun Kick, which is really important because some people didn't know that, especially if you just come back to the game. And this spinning crane kick can also do a huge amount of damage when there's a lot of people that they've damaged because it scales with using abilities on a target, right? So if I hit all three of these guys, you'll see that my spinning crane kick has more stacks, and yeah, it does pretty good damage, right? So what is really really important in the Windwalker's kit in terms of damage rotation, I think Rising Sun Kick is obviously when you're going to see that big burst come out, right? Especially with clones out and cooldowns. And their Fist of Fury is one of their primary means of obviously doing damage, but mitigation because they parry all abilities thanks to Turbo Fists, right? Which gives them the ability to parry all attacks while channeling it and reduces your movement speed. The other thing to note is a lot of them will run Grapple Weapon, which is similar to the Warrior Disarm if you're playing Warrior, which is about 45-second cooldown, and this will mean that you have no ability to fight back, right? So a lot of the defensive rotation for a Windwalker might be using Turbo Fists and to parry all your damage and then disarming you right afterwards. Or if you're not on the target, if you're not on them, maybe they will just throw the grapple weapon out when they see your wall breaker or your avatar, right? And because it's a 30-yard range, you can't parry it like you can parry a warrior disarm. You can't really stop it happening. The only way you can stop it happening is if you're really, really good, you see it in the air and you're not on global, you could blade storm before it actually hits you, or shadow melt. Both very, very difficult to do. So, not something I'd really recommend trying. The other thing that they'll run against warriors might be Tiger's Eye Brew, and this is something which over the game they'll have a whole bunch of these stacks of Tiger Eye Brew, which they can consume, and for roughly, I guess, 20 seconds, they'll have magic damage instead of physical damage, which means bops, armor values, anything like that will be completely nullified. They'll be able to hit you using magic and tend to do a lot of damage for it. So, those are the PvP talents and kind of important sort of baseline considerations. What is important in their talents, right? So, Tiger's Lust, obviously, they have a freedom that they can give themselves. And a lot of the times, what they'll do is they might port or they might roll and then Tiger's Lust, and then you won't be able to reapply a slow. If they don't have Tiger's Lust up and they roll or they Tiger's Lust their healer or something, you can usually catch up because the roll's not that far. But if they roll twice in Tiger's Lust, there's pretty much no way you're getting back to them, right? The other thing is Ring of Peace and Good Karma. So if they use Ring of Peace, obviously everyone's seen this ability where you can drop this down and you can't enter into this ring. It's important to note you can blade storm through this, right? So if you do see this down and you really want to kill whoever's inside there, or you want to go through that, you can use your blade storm to chop through. Um, I don't even think you can leap over it. I'm pretty sure it like boops you off that too. So good karma is essentially the big karma. So if they karma and you break through it, all the damage that they redirect from the karma will heal them. So essentially, karma becomes like a 50% shield and a 50% heal if you break through the entire thing. You might see a different combination of these three defensive rows, right? So dampen harm gives them essentially a wall, which stops damage up from 20 to 50, but depending on how big the damage is. Diffuse magic is a magic damage reduction of about 60%, so it's pretty big and it reverses all the casts. So they might use this against Shadow Priests, Mages, Boomkins, anything where they're going to take magic damage, or even Disc Priests to reverse the mind games. And inner strength is essentially like a 10% flat damage reduction. It stacks up while they're on the target. It's mainly if none of these really apply, which I don't think is that often. Dance to Chi-Ji, this is something really, really important. Dance to Chi-Ji is sometimes you'll notice that their spinning crank kick just starts to crank damage. It starts to do insane amounts of damage, and it's really, really hard to deal with, right? Um, this is the reason why it makes it free and it does an extra 200% damage. Doesn't make it 200% more. I think it ends up being a huge, like, it does like 3 times the amount. So I try and proc it here for you guys. Okay, cool. We procced it here. If I pop my cooldowns, right, and I pop Dancer Chi-Ji, I get it again, you'll see that my Dancer Chi-Ji, did, you know, 20k onto those two mobs and then 14k afterwards, right? So huge amount of damage from that. Um, really, really important to take note of that because sometimes that's a big enough reason to split off from the Windwalker, right? You might not want to sit on the Windwalker as he's got his clones out and is doing Dance Chi-Ji. It's insane amounts of damage that is hard to stop. So, looking at the other talents they've got, it's Whirling Dragon Punch or Serenity. If you see Serenity, this means they're going to do insane single target damage for 12 seconds, but they don't have the clones. So you should really look to CC or stop this because this is scary as hell, right? And you might see this more in twos or something. Whirling Dragon Punch, though, is kind of like, not their execute because it doesn't need to be an execute, but sort of after they use their Spinning Dragon Punch, uh, Rising Sun Kick, and they use Fist of Fury, they get this kind of like ability to use Whirling Dragon Punch at the end, which I think that came off cooldown, but then they shoot up and they can do this AoE kick, which is pretty big damage to everybody nearby, right? So if you see that and you're wondering where that damage is coming from, there you go. So in regards to their offensive cooldowns, right? Their offensive cooldowns are Storm, Earth, and Fire, right? Which splits them into 3, and each of those do 45% of normal damage and healing, which adds up to what 135% of overall damage. So essentially a 35% increase in damage if all targets are hitting the same target. Along with that, they'll usually run something called coordinated offensives, which means that if they all fixate on the same target, they deal 13.1% increased damage. So ultimately, you're looking at like a 40% increase in damage when they have Storm, Earth, and Fire out, which is why it's considering like it's worth considering to use like to fear or stops on the Storm, Earth, and Fire, right? Very, very important. So the other thing is looking at Zuen, right? Let me pull out Zuen. So Zuen is here. Zuen the White Tiger, it works like the old Touch of Death does. So every 4 seconds, Zuen strikes your enemies with Empowered Tiger Lightning, which deals 10% of the damage you've dealt to those targets in the last 4 seconds, and it has a flat, like 400 nature damage pulse, mixed with, where is it? Weapons of Order, which gives them a flat 12.5% mastery increase, plus a mastery increase from Pelagos ability, which is about 100. And it reduces their chai costs by using Rising Sun Kick, and Blackout Kick reduces their abilities, the cooldown of their abilities, right? So it's really big because Mastery gives you 21.4% extra damage when you don't repeat the same ability, and then obviously if you Weapons of Order, that turns to 46. So they're doing essentially 46% more damage, plus the clones. So if you see this whole mix there, you can see how much damage that starts to crank out. And I'm not even doing the rotation properly, right? But you can sort of see how quickly this gets out of control. And, you know, you have Chi-Ji coming out. This Zuen is doing huge amounts of damage as well. It's cleaving all enemies too, and you can sort of see how they can do so much damage that feels almost uncontrollable at times, right? So that is their big damage cooldowns. If you see Zuen and the clones on you, it's really good to trade parry into that because you can parry all the clones and all that damage. Um, Generally, if you see Zuen and you see an opportunity to feed the entire team and his pets, that's huge value too. You might want to look at fearing that. And another really, really important thing on the offensive cooldowns is that they get 2 charges of Storm Earth and Fire, right? So they get it every 45 seconds. A lot of Windwalkers will just use the Storm Earth and Fire by itself and none of the other things, right? And they'll try and bait you to parry. So they might do a whole bunch of damage to you to try and force you to parry and use your trinket and your cooldowns. And then the next go, they'll bring out Zuen and they'll bring out Weapons of Order and they'll pop you, right? So really important to know and wait until you see Tony the Tiger, Zuen, whatever you want to call it, and that Weapons of Order before you commit big cooldowns or commit fears and stuff like that. Storm Earth and Fire on its own will do big damage. It's worth swapping into D-Stance if you are getting hit by all of these, but it's usually not enough to kill you. When you mix that with Zuen and Weapons of Order, that's when you're in huge, huge trouble. So don't get baited by that. It's really, really important. So again, on the other side, they have a couple more abilities to note, which is Fort Brew, which gives them a whole bunch of health, right? And a bit of a shield, and a lot of them will run BM, right? Which means that they can get up to 60k health sometimes, and with Expel Harm, they have a fair bit of healing with Vivify too, right? So don't underestimate their own self heals, they are actually pretty powerful. The next thing to take note of is paralysis and sweep, which is the main ways to CC a target. So sweep is a minute cooldown that stuns everyone for 3 seconds. So it's not a super long duration, but it is AoE, so you want to split around for that. You can use parry and you can parry it if you're really not the focus target. And you can't afford to get swept. You can just put parry up when they want to. You can blade storm it, you can banner it, all these types of things, which are really, really important because if you are able to banner a sweep, they usually can't do their go very easily. They need a little bit of setup and they kind of rely on doing huge damage in that. The other thing is if you get too low in health, touch of death will be an issue, right? So this will roughly do about 11k damage instantly, and oftentimes if they can press this, unless you get sacked, you will die, right? So you want to avoid ever getting too low HP with a Windwalker, because if they're able to press this, you will 100% die. If you're at 20, 30% and you haven't pressed rally yet, that's when you start to consider, cool, I should probably just press this to make sure I'm outside of range. This will go through your parry, this will go through D-stance, you will still die most of the time unless you're very, very lucky, right? So I guess the other thing to take note of is their mobility. So they have roll every 20 seconds, right? And they get 2 of them. So every it has a 20-second recharge. This means that they can roll twice, and then they have to wait a little bit to get one, and it takes 40 seconds to get both rolls back. So you can take note of that. If you see a Windwalker use both his rolls to get to a target and Flying Serpent Kick, they have no real easy way to get back out of there, except by using Transcendence and Transcendence Transfer. And Flying Serpent Kick is a 20-second cooldown, and it goes quite a distance, right? It goes, I guess, how many yards? Does it say how many yards it goes? Doesn't say how many yards, but pretty far. So, you want to watch out for that. If you can stun that as they do it, or you can stun the roll, if they're trying to get away, that does actually mess their mobility up a considerable amount. Now we want to look at Transcendence. So they have to put their port down at the start, and that means it's somewhere on the map. Every 45 seconds, they can teleport back to their port, right? And replace their port again, which essentially gives them a huge amount of mobility. But if they do port and then they go back out to be offensive, you can punish them a huge amount with no easy way for them to get out. So generally what you'll see Windwalkers do in arenas is they will run a lot from warriors because warriors do huge damage to them. It's probably not worth chasing them unless you 100% know you're going to get the kill, and it might just be better to hit the other target, and when the Windwalker comes in, hit him again. The big thing there is that Windwalkers, when they do run and kite, are essentially CCing themselves, right? They're not able to really connect or do anything while they're running away from you. But if they have to, run out and then come back in, that's a huge amount of mobility going back and forth that isn't easily sort of made up for. So big swaps to Windwalkers work really well, and just not chasing them and falling for that is huge. So I think I've covered everything I wanted to in this video. Um, Generally, I think we will talk a little bit more about this in the future. Maybe we'll show some more arena gameplay in these guides. But I did actually just want to do one class a video, because I had some people saying that there was that two classes of video was a bit too much. Um, which I'm happy to work around that, and I completely understand. A lot of these YouTube videos, like, I'll start making them and I'll start recording and I won't realize how much content I actually have to cover. So yeah, hopefully you enjoyed this. Hopefully this lets you understand monks a bit more, right? They're squishy, they're easy to kill, they have all this mobility, but the reason why they're so oppressive is you're probably not respecting their offensive cooldowns enough, right? And I didn't actually talk too much about karma, but karma is essentially their big magic absorb, which they put on someone, which absorbs up to 50% of their health and does 50% of that entire damage to the target via a dot, right? So a lot of times karma really isn't a huge cooldown. It's just 15k HP, which you can burst down. If they're low, if they do it high and early, it's very, very difficult to kill through. Okay, guys, that's this video done. If you enjoyed this content, let me know. Please like, comment, subscribe. If you want to watch some gameplay live, follow the Twitch. All right, guys, take it easy. Bye.